The young and the restless spoilers. The sun had barely begun to set over the shimmering coastline of Nice when the nightmare began. What started as a casual evening between two men with a complicated past ended with one of them lying lifeless under the glow of French lanterns, his glass of wine still half full. Damian Cain, once a fierce negotiator and quietly passionate man, was now a body sprawled across the elegant tiled floor of Cain Ashby's rented villa. Unmoving, breathless, and terrifyingly silent. The waves of the Mediterranean beat against the rocks in rhythmic pulses as if echoing a dark heartbeat. Cain, the last person to see Damian alive, claimed innocence. But when Chance Chancellor arrived on the island the next morning, summoned via an emergency encrypted satellite call, it quickly became clear this wasn't a death by natural causes. Something had gone terribly wrong, and someone among them was a murderer. Chance Chancellor had seen enough in his law enforcement career to recognize fear, and what he saw in the eyes of those assembled was more than just shock. It was the kind of fear that festers in guilt, that poisons the air and makes people second-guess every word they speak. From the moment he arrived, there were whispers behind locked doors, glances exchanged in silence, and too many inconsistencies in the story of Damian's final moments. The official version was simple. Damian had been drinking wine with Cain, grew dizzy, collapsed, and died before paramedics could even be summoned. No one could call for help fast enough, the phones were still down, the signal still mysteriously dead, as it had been since they'd arrived. But Chance, ever the skeptic, wasn't buying it. The first thing he did was isolate the scene of the death. He found the wine bottle still on the table, the glass Damian had barely touched, and the faint smell of something metallic that didn't belong in a bottle of 2015 Bordeaux. A subtle residue on the rim of the glass suggested more than just alcohol. Poison, perhaps? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He secured the evidence and began his methodical process, starting with Cain himself. The man had all the polish of a seasoned manipulator and the charisma to match. He spoke smoothly, with just the right amount of grief and denial, but when Chance pressed him, when he brought up Damian's last words, asking Cain if he intended to kill him, Cain simply shrugged. "We were drinking the same wine," he said again. "If it was poisoned, wouldn't I be dead too?" It wasn't a denial, it was a redirection. Chance took note. Next came the others. One by one, he interviewed every guest trapped on that isolated estate. Phyllis Summers, whose eyes flickered with suspicion but also something deeper, something unspoken. Nick Newman, still shaken, still evasive, avoiding both the questions and Phyllis's stare. Kyle Abbott, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Audra Charles, cool and detached. Every one of them claimed to have seen nothing, heard nothing, suspected nothing. But Chance could feel it, he was circling something real, something rotting just beneath the surface. And then came the question he had to ask aloud, in the dining room where tension was so thick it nearly choked them. "Are all of you suspects?" The room fell silent. No one answered. That silence was an answer in itself. Meanwhile, a new problem surfaced: Damian's body was missing. In the dead of night, as the guests were locked in their rooms by Carter, Cain's disturbingly stoic assistant, the corpse had vanished. No signs of a break-in, no dragging marks, no witness to the removal. Chance was furious. Either someone among them had staged the disappearance, or they were all being played on a level far more complex than anyone had anticipated. He had come to Nice to investigate a possible poisoning. Now he was tangled in something far more sinister, a web of psychological warfare, concealed motives, and vanishing bodies. What made the matter worse was Lily Winters. She had shared something real with Damian, or so it had seemed. They had grown close before this trip, close enough that many believed a future was possible between them. But now, confronted with the news of his death, Lily didn't seem devastated. She was shocked, yes, but not shattered. Her reaction was clinical, composed, almost too detached. Chance observed her carefully, noting how she flinched only when Cain was near. Had she begun to suspect him too? Or worse, was she complicit in something? Was her closeness with Damian genuine, or had it been a cover for something else entirely? Her answers were measured, polite, but not convincing. When asked whether she believed Damian had been murdered, she paused too long before replying, "I'm not sure what to believe anymore." But the deeper Chance dug, the more the timeline refused to make sense. Damian's collapse had occurred just minutes after he accused Cain of trying to kill him. Witnesses swore that Damian had shown signs of confusion and dizziness long before any visible distress. Yet there were no medical conditions on his record, no history of fainting or seizures. The poison theory gained weight, but without a body, Chance couldn't prove anything. Then came the most chilling development of all, the discovery of a bloody knife hidden beneath the cushions of an outdoor sofa. It hadn't been used on Damian, that much was clear. There was no blood trail linking it to the wine scene. But it was recent, fresh. That meant someone else was either already dead, or was about to be. All eyes turned to Chance. Whoever had removed Damian's body, whoever had planted that knife, had done so with intent. And if they believed Chance was getting too close to the truth, there was every possibility they would try to eliminate him next. He began doubling back on every move, watching the guests more closely, refusing food or drink offered by anyone but himself. He turned the villa into his personal fortress, commandeering Carter's security terminals and setting up 24/7 surveillance. Yet even with all these precautions, there was one thing Chance couldn't control: what came in the dark. At exactly 3:22 a.m., the power to the villa went out. The generators failed. The cameras blinked dead. Doors that were once locked opened with an eerie creak. Chance reached for his flashlight, but before he could move another step, he heard something, footsteps behind him. Quiet. Deliberate. Not Cain. Not Carter. Something more dangerous. A shadow moved in the reflection of the window. The glint of a blade. Someone had come for him. But he wasn't going down without a fight. The villa stood in near silence after the blackout, cloaked in unnatural stillness, save for the low groan of the wind skimming off the Mediterranean. Chance Chancellor was already moving before most realized the lights were gone. His training made him fast, his instincts even faster. But even he couldn't deny the lingering dread clawing at his spine. Somewhere in the shadows, a predator was waiting. Perhaps they were already closing in. He had come to Nice to investigate one suspicious death. But now it felt like death had settled over the estate like a fog, unwilling to leave until it claimed one more victim. Or two. The presence of a knife, discovered and removed quietly from the edge of the patio, had transformed what was already a tense atmosphere into a game of survival. Someone on this island had bloodlust. And what disturbed Chance most wasn't that Damian Cain had died under suspicious circumstances, it was the speed with which everyone had moved on. No hysteria. No mourning. Just questions wrapped in polite concern, eyes darting behind wine glasses, glances exchanged that spoke volumes. Lily Winters, who had once been the emotional compass of the group, now looked curiously unfazed. Cain was quieter, more calculated, as if this exact scenario had been anticipated. And the others? They hovered like guests at a masquerade where the theme was betrayal. But now, the odds had shifted. Because someone with a knife had been seen moving in the dark. Someone who didn't run when discovered, someone who lingered. That alone suggested the killer wasn't finished. In fact, it suggested they were only just beginning. And Chance, he wasn't even supposed to be here. His presence was unplanned, unexpected, perhaps even inconvenient to the one pulling the strings. It made him a threat. It also made him disposable. The theory forming in Chance's mind chilled him. What if Damian wasn't the intended target? What if someone else had been marked, and Damian had merely died in the killer's first misfire? Worse yet, what if Cain had been the real target all along? That theory opened a darker possibility. If Chance bore enough resemblance to Cain, especially from a distance in a low-lit estate. What were the odds that a killer lying in wait made a mistake? One well-placed strike, one blade in the back, and the wrong man would be dead. And no one would know it until it was far too late. Adding fuel to this horrific fire was the reality Chance now faced. Connor Floyd was leaving Genoa City. The whispers had already made their rounds in the press, and in the minds of fans. Whether Chance Chancellor lived or died in-story was still up in the air. But the air inside the villa was electric with finality, and the character's fate hung in a deadly balance. Would he be wounded and airlifted out, only to return with a new face? Or would this be the tragic, shocking moment of finality? The one where the hero dies not as a champion, but as a victim of mistaken identity and timing? The next hour moved in fragments, flashes of lanterns, hurried whispers behind doors, the echo of footsteps through marble halls. And then, a scream. Short. Female. Cut off before it could peak. Chance moved immediately, weapon drawn. He burst into the west wing of the estate, heart pounding, every nerve on high alert. But when he turned the corner, he saw no victim. Only blood. A trail of it, leading away from a shattered wine glass near the piano. But it wasn't red. It was darker, sluggish. A deliberate leak, not a spray. Someone had been injured, maybe severely, but was still alive. The path led to the outdoor garden. As Chance moved under the moonlight, flashlight in one hand, sidearm in the other, something sharp and slicing grazed the air near his ear. Instinct saved him. He ducked. Rolled. A shadow leapt from the hedges, a blade shimmered. But it wasn't clean, clinical killing. It was rage. And confusion. The assailant paused mid-swing, eyes wide, recognition delayed. "You're not," the voice gasped. That was all Chance needed. He lunged, disarmed the attacker, pinned them to the ground. The blade clattered onto the stone path. In the chaos, the hood slipped back, and Chance froze. The face staring up at him was someone no one suspected, one of the staff. A man not listed on Cain's hired roster. A silent but ever-present figure who had poured drinks, collected dishes, refilled glasses. An infiltrator. But the most shocking part wasn't the identity. It was what he said next. "I thought you were Cain." The words landed like bullets. The killer had been hunting Cain Ashby. Damian may have been a warning shot, or a casualty of paranoia. But tonight's strike had been deliberate. Chance, in the wrong place at the wrong time, had nearly died simply for looking like the wrong man. Which raised the terrifying possibility that the real Cain was still being hunted. That more bodies would fall. That this entire trip had been set up not by Cain, but by someone else, with the singular goal of drawing him here, isolating him, and watching his world unravel. When Chance handed the attacker over to Carter, who assisted with eerie composure, he couldn't shake the sense that something didn't add up. The man had acted alone, but his words suggested a wider plan. A target list. Cain. Damian. And now, perhaps even Lily. But for now, Chance was bleeding, literally. A long slash down his left arm from the initial attack. It wasn't fatal, but it was symbolic. He was marked. He had come too close to the truth. Too close to surviving. He needed extraction, fast. Except there was no rescue. No working phone lines. No confirmed chopper on the way. Just a message from Carter, "Help is coming." But it may be too late. And as Chance drifted to sleep under morphine and pressure bandages, one question lingered: was this how they would write him out? Or would he wake up as someone else? Only time, and one final strike in the night, would tell.